This week in the conversation, I have the privilege to welcome back into the conversation two good friends, two impeccable writers. I'm going to be talking with Soniyaa Murhe. She's the author of a very interesting romance novel titled One Step Closer, a story I had a chance to read, a wonderful novel. And also with me is Jesmond Grech. He's joining me from Malta, off the coast of Italy. We going to be talking about what it means to be relevant in this tightly controlled literary market, but also new projects and how important it is to keep a fine line between literary fiction and also between fiction works that are currently trending. So also I have to remind you that Jesmond Grech is critically acclaimed, is also the author of an investigative novel titled A Simple Affair. But to get started, to begin, before we can get into the video, I just want to take a short moment to remind you viewers that it is important that you support this effort. And the best way to do so is to subscribe to the conversation. And if you do, don't forget to click the notification bell so that way every time a video is posted, it's going to you directly on your portable as soon as possible. And also, I just want to say that just click the like button if you think this video has been of some interest to you. So let's get started.
Yes.
Again, my name is Ardain Isma, and I'm here this morning or this evening, it depends on where you are across the world, with two impeccable authors. I have with me Soniyaa Murhe, joining me from India. She is the author of One Step Closer, a wonderful romance novel that I had a chance to read, to wolf down, I remember that. And also joining me from Malta, a very interesting, prolific writer, Jesmond Grech. And then we had a chance to talk about his wonderful novel. Back then, it was A Simple Affair. And since then, I don't know. So we have this morning, you two guys. I'm going to begin with Soniyaa, because I remember, Soniyaa, last time we talked, you were talking about several projects. But before we get to the other projects, any literary works now currently working on?
Yes, but I think that's a surprise, and that is something that will eventually unfold as time goes by. It's still in works, and there's a lot to do. And as I mentioned, that I want my work to focus on dealing with a lot of socio-economic issues, especially when it comes to women. So I want to write about that. So yeah, it's a long process, but it's gonna be worth the wait.
Okay, great. And you, Jesmond?
Yes, Isma. I think that basically writing has become, it started as a hobby, but now I am finding myself always having to write something. It got into my blood. So people tell me, people who know me, are you writing anything now? Are you working on? Practically, I'm always working on something. I'm always working on some literary project because, as I told you, it was a hobby, but now it still remains a hobby, obviously, because I'm not a professional writer in the sense that I'm so rich from the books that I've sold that I can say, all right, I can live off the profits of my books. I'm a teacher. But writing fulfills me psychologically, fulfills me in such a way that to feel myself as a human being, I think I have to write. So after the success of my first novel, my first novel in English, because
Right.
as I told you last time,
Right.
I've written in Maltese,
Yeah.
which is my native language. But this was the first time that I've written in English. And I've taken the characters of the first novel, the main characters, that is Inspector De Bono and his team, and they are solving now another case. So the second book, it's written, but as Sonia will know as well, first you have to write it, then there comes the painful and long task of revising, correcting, etc. So yes, I'm working on something. I hope it will be a surprise. When it's published, I'll let you know. Don't worry.
Of course, I know that. We should know. We all should know. But Sonia, isn't that what we do as writers? We always write.
Yeah. And absolutely well put, that writing fulfills your soul and it makes you connect with, emotions and people in, like, even your own emotions that you don't usually address. When you write about it, when you pour it all down onto a piece of paper, it all starts making sense. Sometimes all you need, so sometimes whenever you're in middle stuck into something, I think all you need to do is just write it out, write about it, and you might just find your solution right in front of you. So yeah.
Now, I remember in our last conversation, Sonia, we talked about a sequel for the Romance novel. Is that something you're still anticipating of doing?
Yes, because I didn't want it to stop Shreya's story right over there. I wanted to show people that after fighting so many battles and after coming to that point in her life, she is still moving ahead. There are still a lot of challenges that she yet has to face, and there are a lot of other things that she has to, not prove in a sense, but then take a stand for and maybe create a platform for other women as well. So I think that is something in that way I want to proceed. But as he mentioned, that it's a long process. The reviewing process, the rewriting, the editing, it takes a lot of time. So you're constantly jumping from one chapter to the other one and again back to the first one. So yeah, it's a long and lengthy process.
Isn't that something? I read the story. The story to me ends with a cliffhanger. And I'm still waiting to see how these two will ultimately develop and build a family. So I am waiting.
Yeah.
And I am waiting. And I believe that, Jesmond, I'm also waiting to see what Inspector De Bono is going to do in the second.
It's going to do, yes. As Sonia was speaking, she mentioned the process of a thought from your mind and onto the paper.
Right.
And the thought starts as something hazy, something, not vague. I mean, you know where the thought is leading you, but not exactly, all right? Then you start, writing. Writing is putting down the thought. That's the first attempt. When you read what you've said, you start correcting yourself. So for me, writing is also a very good exercise to exercise your logics, your logic, to think logically. But it is also a good exercise to express your feelings. In fact, some psychologists suggest art to people who are, going through a depression or have some mental problems or whatever. There is a theory that you let the patient express himself by painting, and he's letting out his emotions. Some psychologists even encourage their patients to write, because as you are writing something, a feeling or whatever, you are literally, putting it out on paper, and that sometimes it's good for mental health. Now,
Sonia, let me get
in the cases of artists now, artists, we use writing obviously
as an art form.
As an art form, to give pleasure to people as well, to express something. For me, at least, I use art to express beauty, because I want people to see beauty all over. That is what I believe and what I try to do.
Let me get that to Soniyaa now. Soniyaa, you know what? For the past few weeks, I've been talking to many writers, and I have been asking this specific question. Do you also, Soniyaa, hear your characters talking to you sometimes?
Absolutely. It's a battle of voices in your head. So as Jesmond mentioned that, it just takes you, the story automatically forms in your head. You can see the picture, you can see it happening, you can see the characters, forming on their own, and then they start talking to you. Each of them is trying to tell you their story. Ki, look, this is me, this is what I do, this is the part that I play. So you don't have a plot exactly sketched in front of you, but when you look at these characters, when you look at the final picture, that where you want the story to end or where you want the story to lead, that's when slowly the way starts forming itself. Okay. So yes, the characters do talk sometimes a lot. You have to kind of tune them down.
A lot, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I spoke to Tanvi Gandhi. She is also an Indian. Very, I would say, devoted a movie producer, but she's also a screenwriter. Yeah. And I asked her this specific question also, because I know there's always, Jesmond, a point of contention between writers and also movie production companies. Let's say, for example, your story has been picked up for a feature film, for example. Uh-huh. And all of a sudden, the characters, the people they have chosen for this specific role, they are not the one that you had always anticipated. There's a point of, how do you feel that, Jesmond, on that one? And I'd like to ask Soniyaa the same question too.
Yeah. You've touched on a very important point, because writing is a form of art. Filmmaking is another form of art. Right. Now, when a film, usually, obviously, it's based on a novel. Right. What usually have is that a director reads your book, he falls in love with the story, and he says, and he sees that, sort of film in it. Okay. Now, obviously, you as an author, you must be ready for disappointments, because as I told you last time, maybe you are imagining your character to be that person, or having a sort of shape, while the filmmaker sees that character, that actor as fit to do your character. Sometimes I wouldn't mind that so much. What I would mind is when they change the plot, of my story. That, I think, it's a graver sin. That is a graver sin. The plot is a bit sacred, that is the story. Now, if you want to do that character instead of that, or add something or delete something, for me, at least I'm speaking for me, my personal opinion. For me, that's not so bad. But touching the plot, touching the main story and the storyline, that would create some, problems or some, because the film producer would produce a story which basically I haven't written. So if I haven't written that story, it doesn't reflect what that story means for me. Exactly. It's like a stranger who wrote the plot of that film, But those are some the things, which most probably I think that's the way how it should be done. Those are to be discussed between the author, the script writer, and the movie director. Those three protagonists.
That's it. would you compromise on that is on the physical description of the character, but you would not compromise on the plot? Is that a
So if you see a book, a person can goes on for reading for hours together. So a book doesn't finish in 2.5 hours or 3 hours, whereas a movie is supposed to finish in 2.5 and 3 hours.
right?
So the editing obviously is a very important. Yeah, so editing is very important. But then mentioned that the main message or the main crux, what the soul of the story should be retained. We can remove characters, we can add characters, we can, change the events a little bit. But
Right.
then we have to make sure that the main soul of the story remains the same.
Okay. Now, you know what? This is so true. Because there's a problem. If we want to be the advocate for a film producer, there's an audition process, and you have to have the right person to play the role. And usually, that person
Correct.
may not entirely, what you have in mind as another. So that's when I asked Sonia, and she agrees that you have to compromise on that. But on the plot itself, there's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way. Now,
Yeah.
I want to talk about something
Right.
very important that as we as indie authors, we face all the time. Because a book, just like you said, Jesmond, is a work of art. And if you are an artist, you're supposed to live off your art, But few people will become the commercial successful author. For the simple fact, the big in the book industry, so those names for which you will have to, with which you will have to sign, in order for you to actually to go big on this one. So we are resorting to seeking something, to me, that is more soulful, which is literary success. Because 100 years from now, just mentioned Sonia, someone will still pick up what you have written, what you have created.
Yeah.
Because it says that words can live, 1,000 years, So how do you, Sonia, feel that it's so important you devoted more time to creating a work of art that will remain forever, remembered, I would say, instead of trying to write about what's trending, okay, but may not be necessarily what will sell tomorrow. So how do you see that, Sonia? Sonia, can you hear me? Let's see here. I think we switched. Yes, Sonia, can you hear me now? Did you hear me?
Hi. I actually missed the last 30 seconds. Could you repeat?
Like I said, instead of writing for what's trending, for example, let's say for the past couple of years, publishers were hotly looking for stories based on LGBT, for example, romance, or right now is dystopian fantasy. Right now is trending. You see what I mean? But literary fiction is something that remains standard because it's written to be perhaps even taught at the university level. So Sonia, my question is, do you think it's more important to focus on what is a literary fiction instead of focusing on what is selling, what is trending at the moment?
I think there's a fine balance between that, because as important as literary fiction is, at the same time, what is happening, what is trending is also important, because society is changing so fast. As you said, the LGBTQ community, go a decade back, and the way the society used to treat them back then, and the way society is now embracing them, the way society is now celebrating them. So there's a difference, and this difference occurred only because people took steps to bring it in front of people. So people wrote about it, people spoke about it. So I think there's a fine balance that we need to maintain, because literary fiction is not going to change. It has a certain standard that it upholds, and which is why it is being taught at university levels. But writing about relevant things, the trending things, is also very important, because otherwise, how are you gonna bring a change? How are you gonna, advocate for a change? If I want to advocate for global warming or climate changes, I need to write about it. If I'm advocating for women's rights, or the whole activist and everything, so I need to write about it. I need to let people know that, see, this is the reality, these are the facts. So we need to present and bring those facts in front of people in a way where they tell the true story. So I think maintaining that balance is very important.
So that means, Jesmond,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be either or. It could be just like Soniyaa say, keeping it
The
balanced.
balance, the
Correct.
balance that Sonia mentioned, that's an excellent conclusion. Now, however, that balance sometimes it's very difficult to find
Right.
because, as you said,
Absolutely.
there is the popular, what people want. And obviously, there are people who say, I write what people want because I want to be rich. I want to sell my books at whatever cost. Now, that is a decision that an author has to take. I mean,
Yeah.
when you view your work, is my work a product, or am I going to sell my work as candy or whatever, or am I going to? Is my work something in which I express myself? Even if the expression of myself is not so popular with
Right.
society. To give you an
Correct.
example, just a little example, I mean, in my context, these are things which happen to me. I used to write love novels, romance and whatever, but they always had a sort of story which I liked. I mean, my philosophy in the story.
Right.
There was once a reader who told a friend of mine who suggested, he told me, listen, Jesmond, if you do some Oze scenes in your book, maybe
Right.
some, sex scenes or whatever, they will attract more attention, and I give you a guarantee that they will sell much more than they are actually selling. Now, he was talking to me as a friend. I mean, we knew each other, etc. What he said, most probably, is true. I mean, what he said made commercial sense because, as everybody knows, if you do some, scenes or whatever, they would attract attention. They would create, some sort of, oh, look at that's an interesting scene, or whatever, and people will buy. But it's not in my character to write those kinds of scenes, and that's what I told him. I told him, listen, I am not interested in selling more books. Even even though I know that if I write certain sex scenes or lewd scenes, those will increase the sale of my book. But then if I do that, that work will not be my book. I won't feel comfortable as an author, I mean, of a book in which some scenes were written, So the balance, the balance is very important. Now, what are you going to sacrifice? Are you going to sacrifice what you want to say, your message, for the sake of money? Or are you going to be happy with the money and then say, this is just a book. This is not actually what I thought. This is just a product which sells. That is a question which every author, I think, has to make.
Absolutely.
The right balance will be perfect. Huh?
Right.
I mean, that's the excellent condition. Saying what you have to say in a very popular way, which will make you rich through your books. That would be That would be the best scenario.
So Sonia, so we agree that it just have to play that the fine line between the two and making sure that whatever you write, even if it's what's trending, it has to be written at a level that would be acceptable.
Correct.
Also literary fiction. Okay. But Sonia, let me ask you something here, because I
Yeah.
know
So
that,
it's bottom.
okay.
Yeah.
Did you
So
hear?
I was saying that. Yeah, I was saying that is the bottom line is that it's basically an author's personal choice as to what sort of balance they want to maintain, whether they want to write only about trending things that are going to make them rich, or whether they want to write about things that are like actually relevant and can help people better their lives even by 0.5%. So I think that's like a personal choice.
Let's say, for example, if we talk about a character-driven story, okay,
Yeah.
The protagonist is always present. So a story that's written on the first person, for example. Now, if it's a person's life we're talking about, Jesmond, at some point a human being has to fall in love. You know, there's always part of that, and it depends on how the story's been, unfolding. There might be a situation where, maybe love making can take place. Now, Dr. Sonia, how do you get into this specific description? It's that they having the kissing, for example, or they at the beach somewhere, or they at a party somewhere. They hit his own. So how do you deal with that?
So I think that thing, the best what you can do is describe it you can use nature, or nature as you can drive inspiration from nature, like beauty. Nature is beautiful. So when you're describing, suppose, a kissing scene, or they're on the beach, so you can describe in a way where you use a lot of metaphors, because I think metaphors relate to people on a very different level.
Correct.
So when you say that her eyes were shining as pearls, so it immediately creates, a vision of beautiful pearls in front of you. So then the reader can imagine, okay, so, she was as beautiful as that. When you say her hair was of chestnut color, so immediately a beautiful brownish golden hue comes in front of your eyes. So I think using natural elements is a very good way to write these scenes, or these kind of so there you're actually maintaining the dignity of those moments.
Correct.
So if you're talking about a kissing scene or a love making scene, there, while using these metaphors and while using these elements as binding factors, you're actually maintaining and increasing the dignity and the value of that part of the story. And I think that is what would appeal to the people a lot more.
I agree.
Okay, but Jesmond, let me ask you something, Jesmond. I have a question. Now, we've only got a time, but I really need to hear what Jesmond has to say about that. Now, they say as an author, as a novelist, okay, you don't have to be explicitly war on your description, but to some extent, you need to describe the story in a way to give the reader a chance to process, what you're talking about. Give him let's say, for example, the characters are dancing. You don't have to explicitly, tell about the move and the dance, because what you describe may not necessarily be what a reader might have in mind. So you give the reader just a little bit of freedom. Do you agree with that, Jesmond?
Yes, I agree 100% with what was said and with what Sonia said, because there is always a way and a way to say anything at all. Now, I used to listen to my dad saying that when they went to the movies. Now, the movies were way back in the 1950s, 40s, or 50s, okay? So the censorship was really, there was censorship and whatever. And the kind of movies that they seen in the 1940s and 50s are not the kind of movies that we see today, okay? And when they had sex scenes, in the 1940s or 50s, they weren't explicit as they do today. They show, I mean, everything from A to Z. They simply give innuendos. For example, she comes out of the bathroom, and that means that they had sex or whatever. So there's a way to say things. There is a genre of literature called erotica.
Yes, yes.
Erotica, that's the genre of literature which describes everything into detail, because the purpose of the genre is to stimulate people. Now we're speaking about true literature or a clean, let's just describe it as a clean novel, okay? Right. Obviously, in my novels, there are people who have sex, who kill each other or whatever. I mean, they do what people do in their everyday life. But there's a way to describe things. And I think the good author is the one who suggests, not who tells. I mean, if you tell something, it's a description. If you suggest, you let, as you said, Ardain, you suggest, you give the reader the chance to say, so that's what happened. Yes, that's what they did, and that's what happened afterwards. You respect the intelligence of the reader. That's something which an author should do.
Okay. So now, since we're running out of time, I have one question for each of you. I'll begin with Soniyaa. Now, when do we expect to, you don't have to give us a specific date, but when do we expect to read the sequel?
Hopefully by the end of this year, but if not, by the mid of next year for sure.
Okay, so in the meantime, so we'll be waiting. We'll be holding our breath. I will be holding my breath. I'm a big fan of your writing, so.
Thank you so much.
That's good.
And you, Jesmond?
Well, the second novel of the series, Murder Mysteries Immortal, it is written, but as I told you, I'm in the process of revising it. And when you revise, you have to have time. And things happened in my life during the past few months where I had other things to do. And as I told you, I'm only a part-time writer. It is not my job. So I have to find time after work, when my mind is settled, when I've rested and whatever. And, and I have to have at least an hour or two straight to start correcting. Now, that is the ideal, but the ideal is not so, it's not so lucky to find it. These things take time, but I'm working on it. And now that school is almost over and the summer holidays are going to start soon, I'm planning to end my revision, finish up my revision during the summer holidays. So next September/October, I will be in a position to submit the manuscript for publication.
Okay, so I'm going to say on this wonderful note, it has been such a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
With me, two old friends, critically acclaimed author Soniyaa Murhe. She's the author of the wonderful romance novel, of which I had the privilege to read, titled One Step Closer. And also critically acclaimed author, Jesmond Grech. And he's the author of the wonderful investigative novel titled A Simple Affair. So we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your invitation. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.